Well, first I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. This is a picture of where I live. And so let me get the slideshow to play from the start. Okay. This is a picture of where I live. Another picture of where I live. Another. I'll introduce myself in the traditional manner that we do in Mexico. So I won't talk about myself. I'll talk about my family. This is a picture of Mexico. This is where my father was born, where the little yellow symbol is in this river valley. It's not a city. It's what's called a rancho. And my mother was born in Uvalde, Texas. You can see where that is. This is the Gulf of Mexico. This is the capital, Austin, and this is the border between the United States and Mexico. So today I want to talk about program development and implementation. And I'll give you a little background. For the last 20 years, I've been evaluating federal, state, and local programs. And in the course of evaluation, which is an important component of program development and implementation in the United States, I've had an opportunity to be on program development teams, especially in the sense of contributing to developing the evaluation plan. And I've done this on multi-million-dollar programs. So the first thing I want to tell you about program development implementation, there are no hard and fast rules. As I've worked on the development of different programs and the evaluation of programs, this is one thing that is clear. There's many different approaches to developing and implementing a successful program. And but over time in the United States, there's ideas and concepts that have become widely accepted, and those ideas are used in it's like a template. People use different concepts like templates, so that way you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time that you develop a program. In education, obviously, in a central education system in the United States, we have not really a completely decentralized system. The state function of controlling education is done in what we call states, and what in Kazakhstan, I think they'd be called provinces. And so the education function is decentralized. And so program development and education can happen in the United States across several different domains. It can happen at the federal level. So the federal government will fund a program, and the development of that program will be submitted to the government for approval. It can happen at the state level, or it can happen at the local level. So the first thing that we do here in the United States when we're going to develop a program is we do what's called a needs assessment. And so we want to assess or reassess the need that we want to address. And a part of that is one of the first steps is to assess or reassess the capabilities of the team that's going to implement the program, to make sure that you've got a team that consists of the right people to have a successful development and implementation phase. So I'm just going to give you a brief idea of a phase one of program development as it's done in the United States, or at least as I have observed it being done. And that's the first thing, obviously, is to establish the team that's going to do the program development, the program planning. And then you develop the program goals and objectives. And then here in the United States, although we've noticed that it's been translated into Russian and to quite a few languages, and that's what we call a logic model. And the logic model is a template that's used to develop a program and, more importantly, to determine how to evaluate it. So now we'll have a brief digression or detour. And I want to talk a little bit about the logic model, because I've never, in the many, many programs I've been part of, I've never been involved in a program that did not use the logic model. So I can't say that it's universal here, but it must be very close to universal, because at a lot of the conferences, program conferences that the federal government or the state government holds, that's the model everybody uses. So I want to talk a little bit about that to give you context of the ideas and concepts that I'm speaking about. So the logic model is a tool that's used by program managers and evaluators to develop programs effectively. And there's over the years there's criticism of the logic model, but the criticism is more based on detail than the overall. What the logic model is it's a template that you can use to develop and evaluate a program. And because it's relatively easy to use and it's developed effective programs, it's become very widespread. Its use has become widespread in the United States. Okay. So the logic model describes the logical linkages among the program resources, activities, outputs, the audience or the subjects of the participants in a program, and the short range and the intermediate and long-term goals. So one of the things that the logic model does is it places a lot of emphasis on evaluation. And this really started in the United States in the 90s, where evaluation was pushed by the federal government. It became an important component in program implementation and development, that you had to have measurable goals and objectives. And so that it was at that time that the logic model started to come into use. So once you use the logic model to develop a program, the most important aspect of it, well, at least in terms of evaluation, is that it can be evaluated. There are measurable goals and objectives. So if you say that, for example, and I've worked evaluating teacher math, actually improving teachers' mathematical abilities. So obviously you give a pre-test on the material that you're going to cover, and you give a post-test, and you see if the teacher's knowledge of a particular aspect of mathematics is improved, or if their concept and understanding of the pedagogy or the method of delivery of mathematics concept is improved. So you need baseline data in order to measure. So in almost all federal programs, you have a pre-test and a post-test. And then from the pre-test, you can try to determine if your goal has been met. Say that you want to show a 10% increase in teachers' mathematics knowledge, then you pre-test, you post-test, and that will show you whether you achieved your goal or not. So the same essential components and concepts are found in across all logic models. So you have the inputs; those are the resources that you need to operate the program or to drive the program. And you have the outputs, and these are the activities that serve the participants. For example, in a if you want to improve teachers' math abilities, the outputs are the actual classes or seminars that you're going to give the teachers. And then the outcomes, as I've stated, is whether there's actually been any improvement in terms of the participants. So just to talk about the application in STEM, to implement a STEM program, especially on a nationwide level, what are the important aspects would be the mathematical knowledge of the teachers as related to the curriculum that's going to be used to help children move in the direction of science and technology. So it'd be important to measure that and to determine if the teachers are in fact able to implement the new curriculum. We would assume that they would be, but if you are developing a program and you want to assure success, you want to make sure that you examine all the details. And so that, for example, would be a detail, even though the development of the curriculum is a separate performance issue. The training of the teachers to deliver the curriculum, the measurement of the teacher's ability to deliver the curriculum, any problems that you're going to have in administration, all of these things would go into the logic model. And so let's now talk about a needs assessment. And simply put, a need is, as you can see, it's the gap between what is and what should be. So what is where we're at now. That's why you do a needs assessment. And we do needs assessments now in the United States on almost all programs, even for privately funded programs. Most want some type of needs assessment, whether the program itself will design and execute a needs assessment, or whether you use census data or local data to develop a need. So if you can't show a need for a program, then it's hard to get funding. So the assumption would be in implementing a STEM program that you want to either improve or accelerate the mathematical curriculum, and you're hoping that perhaps in an international comparison or within country comparison, city versus rural comparison, that the mathematics skills of students that are in a STEM curriculum improve at a faster rate than those that are not given a STEM program. And of course, in education, the control groups in the United States are always problematic. You have to determine how you're going to get a control group being a group of participants that doesn't get the new curriculum. So you need a control group in order to determine if in fact your curriculum is what has caused the improvement in the mathematical ability of the students, let's say. So I just made this as a quick example. So let's say that the desired result of implementing a STEM program in Kazakhstan is that 100% of third grade children will meet the state proficiency level in regards to STEM and math. So we do an assessment of needs now, and we find out that only 60% of third grade children in Kazakhstan meet that proficiency level. So what that tells us is that we have a need of 40%. So 40% of that we need to devise ways to get the 40% of children to reach the proficiency level. And a needs assessment, it's a systematic assessment, and it let me and I'm sure that everyone in the audience knows this, but evaluation is a form of research, and we use social science research methods. It's very difficult in education. It's almost impossible to do a placebo. So we don't go, we can't go to that extent, but we can do control groups. And usually a control group isn't even in the same city, but it's hard to implement a program politically in a district and have a control group. So there's widespread use of social science methodologies to evaluate programs and to design and implement needs assessments. So these are done in a rigorous manner, and they're done in the same manner that someone conducting research, scientific research in social sciences would do. So it is a systematic set of procedures. And you're really conducting this research and a planning activity to determine if there is in fact a need. So it's highly unlikely but possible that enough children in Kazakhstan are meeting the STEM curriculum goals and objectives to satisfy the state mandated goal and objective. I would imagine that's highly unlikely, or there wouldn't be a desire to examine the question of STEM. But you do a needs assessment to find out exactly what the need is. So curriculum development is a specialized field in the United States. So within a college of education in a major university like Minnesota. Minnesota is one of the major universities in the world. And in a major university, you're going to have what's called a college, or a college of general education. Then within that, departments of higher education, curriculum development, language. You'll have these different departments. And evaluation has traditionally been, it's not as much as it was, but educational evaluation is a specific field. So in doing a needs assessment, you're going to use many methodologies that are accepted methodologies in social science research. And there are some methodologies that are in a way specific to education, and that's simply because certain research methodologies are not amenable to use in education. So a needs assessment is using basic scientific research methods. And when you're doing an education assessment of educational needs, you need to find out if the community is interested, and you need to determine what the mission is of the program, the resources and capabilities, and the significant or particular environmental conditions. And by environment, I'm speaking about the socioeconomic environment in which the program is going to be implemented. And you do a needs assessment because you want to make sure that you match the needs and the capabilities of the program implementers. And you also want to set realistic and meaningful goals. I can tell you, as someone that's been in the field for 20 years, you'd be surprised at how often program development teams that don't have an evaluator as part of their team will develop very unrealistic goals and objectives. And often when you come in as an evaluator, that becomes a big issue, that they've set what in English is called pie in the sky. I don't know how you translate that, but it means unrealistic, too idealistic goals and objectives. So it's really important. This is something that I've emphasized to the teams that I've worked on over the years. it's really important that your goals are realistic and that they're meaningful. And of course, you want to use, all programs have limited resources, at least all the programs I've ever been part of. And another thing that is often overlooked in program development is the need to sustain the program. In other words, how are you going to make this program work over time? Especially in the United States after your funding runs out. That's proved to be a very, very difficult thing. And you want to make sure also that in developing the needs assessment that you're going to, in fact, enhance the learning process for the students. And the reason that needs assessments, they've been around a long time, but they've really, in the last 20 or 30 years, have become an important part of program planning and implementation. And part of it is because of limited resources. Too often in the past, programs were developed that sounded really good and they had really high motives, but it turned out that the people that you wanted to deliver the program to were not interested in the program. This is really true in the United States in social service programs, in many social service programs. It's very difficult to get the community to participate. And so because there's not enough resources to meet all the needs, you want to make sure that when you develop a program, that it's going to meet a specific need. And again, I want to say that needs assessments are a fundamental part of developing a program, and they contribute greatly to the success of the program because they help the team developing the program, implementing the program, to make sure that the program is matched to the needs that have been assessed. So needs assessment is important to project design and implementation. And why is that? Because it's the one tool that helps you understand the community that you're going to serve and understand what the needs are. And the people that are going to have the service delivered should ultimately benefit from a needs assessment. So what our goal is in programming, whether it's developing a curriculum or a social service program, we have many, many social service programs in the United States that are funded at the federal and state level. And in the education field, our goal is obviously an effective program that the educational services are targeted and the delivery systems are functioning efficiently. So this is important. Effective programming really is based on the foundation of data rather than guesses, or what we call in English a hunch is like a guess, or you have a feeling that this is what's out there and this is what's needed. Over time, we've found that when data is used, you have more effective programming. Probably the reason for that is you're more closely related to scientific methods. So I'm talking a lot about needs assessment because it's really the first step in developing a program. I mean, you could do 10-session, 1-hour seminars on needs assessment and really go into the details of it. It's not a really simple subject. It's a very complicated subject and usually takes considerable time to conduct an effective needs assessment. So I'm just trying to, I've focusing on needs assessment because it's step number one in developing effective programming. So when you plan a needs assessment, you want to set what the focus is, and you want to, through the process of development and the program team, you refine, I guess maybe a word you can use in Russian is purify the issues so that you're very, very focused on the need, and trying to identify the need. And of course, you've got to establish the planning team. And then you have to have a plan. How are we going to carry out the needs assessment? Often in needs assessments, you have to use statistical sampling. It's, I mean, in a let's say in a big city like Almaty, to do a needs assessment that's not based on statistical sampling would be difficult. Although in education, it's much easier for a centralized educational agency, Ministry of Education, to administer tests, all the tests on a certain day, gather all the data. So there is that benefit in education as opposed to, because I work in education and social service programs. So it's easier in education to get baseline data. And always when you're implementing a program, you want to review the literature. If you're doing a STEM program and you've never had a STEM program implemented before, there's a lot of literature on STEM programming, implementation, needs assessment. So you want to review the literature. You don't want to, what we call in English, reinvent the wheel. This is a commonly used phrase in programming. You don't want to spend a lot of time gathering knowledge that somebody already has gathered. And I use this, what we call the TOP program, targeting outcomes of programs. It's a model. I don't know if it's been translated into Russian like the, or Kazakh like the logic model has been, but there are models that have been designed as templates to help in planning, needs assessment, and help in program development. So an important part of planning needs assessment is designing the data collection system. Usually in education, those are already in place. So the ministry might have a centralized database in which they feed student outcome data, and then they can analyze that data across different rubrics. And you want to define the participants. So as I said earlier, you might say we want to focus on 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade to give children a good foundation in math and make sure they have a very good foundation. So you need to define the participants in a needs assessment. So in a K through 12 needs assessment, the needs of college students would be not relevant. They wouldn't be participants. And within K through 12, you might focus on certain groups. So you want to make sure that you refine and define the participants. And you want to make sure that that you not only have a data collection system, but that you have strategies to collect the data. But generally in education at this day and age, most educational systems have computerized data systems for analysis. Nonetheless, you have to gather and record the data. So how are you going to do that? And also, it's important to, I think, to consider that if our focus is on, let's again say that our focus is on 3rd to 6th grade students. I'm just choosing that out of the air. There's more involved than the specific needs of the students. As I said earlier in the presentation, you have the capabilities of the teachers, of the school directors. All of these are important in implementing a program. So if all you do is assess the student need and you don't assess the teacher's capability to deliver the program, or you don't assess what we call teacher development, which is post-certification classes to enhance skills. If you don't assess those, the program, you might have a curriculum that could be very successful, but if the people that deliver the program are not trained in how to deliver the program, you might have a program failure. So that's why it's important to determine the priorities, and you want to identify potential solutions. And that's very important, is to try to determine how you can solve the problem or the need. And then obviously you want to be able to disseminate this information to within your system. So you have to synthesize the information and create reports. So program planning requires a lot of attention to detail. It's a very detail-oriented process, and it's a process that requires good team management. You have to have a good management team to keep the group on task. Excuse me. And you have to keep in mind the goals. Once you've set goals, you have to make sure that the program that you're planning is going to meet those goals, has the capabilities of meeting the goals. And I don't know about program planning in Kazakhstan, but in the United States, I have to tell you again, it's a highly developed nation. You would be surprised at how often a program has unattainable goals or goals that aren't very meaningful. In other words, if you set a goal, if the goal isn't meaningful in terms of the outcome that you're trying to determine and you meet that goal, what have you done? Well, from an evaluation standpoint, you really haven't done anything. Yet you can tell people, well, we met our goals. So it's really important to make goals that are attainable. The example that I use when I'm talking to program planners, and I always tell them, don't set a goal that says, we're going to solve the problem between the Israelis and the Palestinians in 1 hour, because you're not going to do that. And so it's really important to carefully, very carefully consider the goals. Oftentimes there's political factors, there's socioeconomic factors, there's other factors that come to play in developing goals and objectives, but the project team has to the greatest extent possible, and often it's not possible, they have to resist the outside pressure to set goals that aren't meaningful. Because in the end, if a project doesn't meet the goals, it's the people who planned it that are going to be looked at to be responsible for that. So that's why it's very important for people within the program to make sure they can meet the goals. And this is a very, very important part of program development. That's the program evaluation is not an add-on. It's not something that you develop the program, and after you have it completely developed, somebody at the table says, oh, wow, we need to get an evaluator in here. That's not the time to get an evaluation person involved. Evaluators should be involved from day one, should be part of the original team, the needs assessment team, the planning team, the setting of goals and objectives. That person should be involved. Or sometimes you'll have actually more than one person. I've been involved in evaluation where here in the state of Arizona on the improving teachers' mathematics skills, where there were 6 or 7 evaluators, was a statewide team. And so you really want to make sure that you have that you understand that evaluation is a critical component of program design. And that's because a well-designed evaluation system, and each program needs to have an evaluation system that's designed to make sure that you're going to generate the data that is vital to determine if you've met your goals and objectives. And again, believe it or not, sometimes programs will set goals, and I know it's unbelievable, but they'll set goals, and somehow they won't have collected meaningful data to determine if they've met the goal. And it happens. It doesn't happen that often, but it can happen. And so when you're talking to people about evaluation, you want to make sure that you cover all of the issues that could cause problems later on. Because often, if you haven't collected the data that will give you a meaningful idea if you've met the goal, once the program is operational, it's just about impossible to start to collect that data. So you early on in the program, you select an evaluation design, pre and post test. You might use survey instruments. For example, you could use a survey instrument to go out to the directors of schools, or what we call a principal, the person who is in charge of a school. You might do a survey to determine how they feel about the capabilities of their staff to implement a project, and what training and what assistance will be needed to bring that particular school into a state of readiness to successfully deliver the program. Sometimes in education, not so much now, but over time, that's been a problem, that there's been too much focus on the curriculum and sometimes even the teacher training, and not a focus on the strategic issues that can affect program evaluation and program outcomes. So in designing program evaluation, you want to look at what are the evaluation questions. The questions are how you determine what data you need to gather in order to be able to, for example, tell the ministry we were successful in our school. You want to determine the measurement approach. Now, often this is going to be done at the ministerial level. So this often, if a program is being implemented at a centralized ministry, for example, in the state of Arizona, we have what's called a Department of Education within the state, and often they will design the evaluation. So the schools don't have to design the evaluation. The program comes as an entire package. But for those that are working in the centralized ministries or departments, they need to have a team that's capable of determining what the evaluation questions are, what the approach of measurement is going to be. And again, I emphasize in education, it's a wide spectrum approach. You don't want to focus on a narrow concept like student outcome, because student outcome is often affected by other factors. So you want to take in the beginning of a program development, you want to take a strategic view. You don't want to be looking at school A, teacher B. You want to be looking at all the schools and the capabilities of all the schools, all the teachers. And when you do that, that often will lead you to a proper measurement approach. And the other thing is, although this is losing support in the United States, interestingly enough, at the doctoral education level, and that's what we call generalizability of the findings. So if you were to do a pilot program, you would find that you want to make sure that the issues that you discover in the pilot program are generalizable, which means they will apply. So thanks, Spasibo. And if any of you participants are interested in carrying on a discussion with me about this, that's my contact information. Feel free to email me. And you can see my email there at the bottom of the screen. So if anybody that has a question or comment or even criticism, you can let me know that way. And I also want to say I just completed in January 3 albums, music albums. And if you'd like to hear the music that I've created, you can do that on Facebook at Baja, Arizona. And the URL is at the bottom of the screen.